Good evening, everyone. I'd like to start welcoming to the Board of Finance meeting, regular meeting on Monday, November 16th, 2020. First item on the agenda is public forum. That's my understanding that we have somebody to speak to us in public forum this evening, it appears. Mr. McElhenney.
Good evening.
For the record, you should state your name and address, though.
Gary McElhenney, 411 Nortontown Road, Guilford, Connecticut. This morning, the Board of Selectmen, I take that back. This morning, prior to the Board of Selectmen's meeting, there was a town meeting at which 29 people appeared and voted 27-2 to approve the acquisition of what we're calling the Route 80 property. It's 27.21 acres in North Guilford, just south, primarily bordering on Route 80 with a couple of accesses onto Long Hill Road. For those that are familiar with the area, it's just to the east of the gas station and that little house there. And it stretches down Route 80. It's been walked a number of times by staff, by land acquisition, by the facilities task force. And I will back up by saying that one of the recommendations of the facilities task force was to move public works. It's not a new idea. It's an idea that was actually memorialized in the 2007 Town Hall South plan. By coincidence, for another purpose, I was reviewing the 2000 minutes of the Land Acquisition Commission, and it was discussing the purchase of this property for municipal use. And so it's an idea that has been around. The reasons to move public works by recommendation of the task force was A, they don't have enough space. They're cramped where they are. B, it's at the far southeast corner of town, which presents serious problems for them getting to other parts of the town. And primarily that it's in a flood zone, so that should there be a serious storm and a serious flood, the public works facility would be isolated. Let me point out at this point, when I say public works, I really mean public works and park and rec operations and facilities, which needs to be together with public works, because public works does most of their mechanical work. And so really they're symbiotic facilities. For the sake of ease, I'll continue to use public works. The facilities task force has looked at a variety of parcels. The existing space is 6 acres down there. One of the problems with having only 6 acres is that there is not enough indoor space, and we're leaving a serious quantity of $200,000 and $300,000 pieces of rolling stock outside because they can't be stored inside, and you can just guess at what the rate of deterioration is if they can't be stored inside and the rate that they'll need to be replaced. So, I mean, there's really a number of economic reasons for doing this. The task force reviewed a number of parcels, and in fact did tender an offer to a parcel further south down Long Hill Road, which curiously was rejected, and I'm sure they well, I won't even go into that. It was rejected, but it was on Long Hill Road to get access to 77. You would either go way up, way down, or build a bridge sort of through the Bittner Baldwin property over the West River, sort of we had looked at this for a while, and finally I called Matt and I said, is there any reason why we shouldn't call the Catholic Church and ask them? So we wrote a letter. We asked them. We're not sure that they had spent a lot of time looking at that, but they were very, very receptive. And we fairly quickly, with a process of the town getting an appraisal and them getting a broker's opinion, unfortunately, because I think the broker leaked it to some people because they got, before we could come back with our offer, they had 2 offers from developers for the property. So we went up a little bit from our appraisal, and we came up to an agreement to offer them $495,000. We have done the preliminary title search. The property is clean, and it's never been anything but farmland. So the town meeting this morning voted in favor of proceeding, and therefore we have come to the Board of Finance. I guess, if I'm correct, Matthew, to not necessarily for approval, but to discuss the method of finance. Is that accurate? Or do we think
Gary,
it needs their approval?
Yeah, at this point, we have a couple of options related to how do we fund this purchase. The first of which is the land acquisition fund, which Mary Jane, I think the number is what, about $887,000 in that fund. That fund is the fund that derives its revenue sources from things like cell tower rentals and any other little parcels that the town sells, and there's a couple other feeders into that as well. The second option is the $3 million bond fund that was established back when Sam Bartlett was first selectman, sitting at this desk. I think probably in 2005. Yeah,
It was a $5 million.
$5 million. You're right. It was $5 million. We've exercised a significant amount of the options on that. And Mary Jane, if you wouldn't mind refreshing my memory, we have a little over $1 million, I think, left in that. But the distinction is in the 3 categories of open space: A, B, and C. A being pure open space, not to be used for any either passive or active recreation, but just completely open space.
No, it can be used for passive. It can be used for passive.
Passive for hiking, you're right.
Yeah.
B for potentially playing fields, those kind of things. C for potential municipal use for whatever purposes we deem appropriate. For my understanding is that the buckets were, A was standalone for a certain amount, B and C were combined for a balance of what was not already dedicated towards complete open space. So Mary Jane, would you mind just letting us know what we have available, and then we'll open it up to questions from the board members relative to how we divvy up those funds.
So left in A, the primarily open space is approximately 460,000, and a combined B and C, which this property would fall under, is 586,000.
Thank you, Mary Jane. Any questions on that?
Sorry.
Did you Gary how big the property is?
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, how big the property is.
21
how
21 acres, 21 and change, 21.21.
And what was the price that we were offering them again? What was the
495,000.
495? Okay, thank you.
Gary, I have in my notes, you said 27.21 acres. So is it 21 or 27?
Now you got me confused. Let me look it up.
Yeah, he did say 27.1. I put that 0.21. I put that in my notes as well.
Okay.
All right. I'm sorry, I've been playing land acquisition stuff all day long, and I'm confusing myself. 21.72.
Good job, Mary
I think
Jo.
I might have said 27.12.
Yeah, you had all the right numbers.
I had the right numbers, just in the wrong order. 21.72.
Just so folks understand, currently the Public Works facility sits on about 6 acres.
Right.
It is at this point wholly inadequate for our needs. So the anticipation is once we complete the evaluation that is currently underway by an engineering firm relative to the facility's needs for a new Public Works facility. We're expecting that will grow beyond that 6 acres that we currently have today, particularly since the Park and Rec organization does not have, and I know you guys are aware of this, with the various capital budget requests that have come across over the past couple of years for additional garage bays, that we'll probably be closer on the order of 8 or 9 acres for usable space, and I don't hold me to that number. There are some concerns relative to buffers from neighbors. There are also some natural buffers that will need to be adhered to relative to wetlands and also just the topography. So the anticipation, Gary, again, you and I have both been cautious about how many acres, but I can't imagine that all told it's going to be any more than 10 acres or half of the parcel.
That's going to be usable land?
Correct.
Thank
Well,
you.
there's possibly more usable land, but the question is,
Yes.
what do we need?
And some consideration for the neighbors to not go, to keep as far away from them as we possibly can, either with natural barriers or, there could be some mitigation that is appropriate. I mean, just blue skying. I mean, one of the things that the task force also determined is that there's a lack of secure paper storage place. I could see, maybe some sort of a paper vault in here where people can store stuff safely, fireproof, waterproof, etc. But so I'm sure there may be some uses for it that grow, but it's more than adequate for public works as we now understand it. Public works department.
Are there any estimates as to what the conversion would cost us?
None at this point, Ken.
No.
We're nowhere near that number. We are, as I said, we're currently exploring just what the needs are for an appropriate facility up there, long before we start talking about design. And Gary and I and Bob, I know Bob has also been talking about this. We are possibly 3 to 5 years away from a facility actually materializing on that property.
Right.
Two quick questions I have. One of them you already answered, Gary, because one of my questions is going to be any other uses that the town might be looking at for this, but you've kind of broached that already with paper storage or vault, but I'm assuming that will also be part of this study and input by the facilities committee, right?
Right.
As far as what else might be able to fit up there, obviously with total respect to the neighbors and the acreage that's there.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay.
There is also another potential use up there, and this was offered up this morning by Keith Bishop at the town meeting. Was there is the possibility that there is going to be enough land up there for us to put in some hiking trails. So theoretically, that it becomes as good as open space in portions of that property.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's other, there's other things that are brewing in my head, like, is there any opportunity for solar, any opportunity for playing fields? I mean, you could go through the whole list of things that you could do with property, but I'm I'm expecting, assuming correctly, that the facilities task force will figure that out and what the best uses are, so.
You know, personally, I would hope that solar would be part of the answer.
Well, when you mentioned Keith Bishop, it's the first thing I thought of because he's got a big solar field, and you know, I know he's a big advocate of it, and I believe in it as well. So,
Agreed.
my second question was, you said something that when it comes to environmental, always is a little bit of a oxymoron, and that's farmland and clean. You know, farmland, I don't know what was farmed there. I'm not sure, but I know when you do environmental on any kind of land that was farmed at one point, there's always the concerns of fertilizers and other items. And I'm sure that's part of the assessment that you're going to do. Is there any indication of that? When you said both in the same sentence, I just got a little bit concerned.
No, it would appear there was primarily grazing land.
Oh, grazing. Okay, for like cattle and
Yeah, I mean, there's barbed wire, there's still some remnants of barbed wire fencing there. I mean, it hasn't been used in decades. I mean, there's actually some nice lumber there. I suspect we can make a few bucks from selling some of those gorgeous trees.
I think it was donated to the diocese in 1971, and it sat fallow for years and years before that.
It was actually sold to the diocese by the Guilford Savings Bank in 1973.
Back in 2003 or 2004, Carl tried to get the diocese to sell it to the town of Guilford, and they were not in the market to do so. So I'm kind of happy to hear it because we had looked at it way back then.
Yep. It's reflected through the minutes of land acquisition. I think what happened is that they brought in some professional property management people, a couple of them, and they started reviewing all this. And so when our request came, it was like, yeah, we know what we've got, and we know it's, you know, we know that we don't have a use for it. And so they were ready to negotiate.
At the time, there was some thoughts that the diocese would use it as a cemetery, but they were not at all ready to move forward on it, and they didn't even want to discuss selling it to the town.
You're right. You are absolutely right, Veronica. In our discussions with the representative from the diocese, there were two other additional considerations. One was another Catholic church up to serve that part of town, and the second consideration was for an elementary school, in addition to the cemetery. So
yeah.
Well, to be respectful of everyone's time, I know we have an agenda to get to. We could discuss this a little bit further under old business. Again, we're having a discussion about it now. You're saying, Gary, Matt, that there's no decisions necessarily on the Board of Finance side except for funding. That is correct?
Tonight, no, there is no actual request for decision. If we come back to you with a recommendation that we would like to use the proceeds from the land acquisition bond, then it would be incumbent upon you to approve that or not. If we elect to use the land acquisition fund monies, we would be able to do that through the Board of Selectmen. I do want to alert you to the fact that there is another parcel which I think you have been apprised of that we are working on, and that is the Thane property, which is currently under phase 2 evaluation. We have a contract in place. That is the parcel, the little hole in the donut, if you will, down at Public Works facility is the former trolley car restoration facility. And we are, as I said, we got some encouraging news this week about the phase 2 stuff and the potential for that property to fall under the auspices of the Transfer Act. And it looks as if it will not. And I think, Gary, what's our number on that? 425? Is that what was our total exposure on that property?
Yeah, well, it's 425 subject to information about whatever there might be, whatever the cost of remediation might be,
Right,
which might open up an additional discussion.
correct, correct. All right, so we have those two, and at some point, once we get clear of the Thane property evaluation, we will probably come back to you with a requisition for one of these properties falling under the bond proceeds, because at this point, I don't think we have enough in either the BC or in the straight land acquisition fund. So we will be coming back with a recommendation or an ask for you to consider one of these two properties for the bond fund.
Are we under contract with either of the properties?
Well, yeah, we are under contract for both
We
of
are.
them.
With contingencies, yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right.
Quick question.
Let me just say while we're here in this forum, that the logic of purchasing the Thane property is that it provides some immediate relief for the needs of public works. As you know, we're paying for a trailer for Park and Rec. This has facilities which are usable. It has storage space. It could well provide a facility to put the truck wash in on a temporary basis and then get moved, because that material equipment could get moved. And on the other side, it completes the hole in the donut, as Matt put it, which means that we would control everything on driveway past the commercial building that you get to first. And that would open up the idea expressed in the Town Center South plan of developing that space for transit-oriented housing, commercial, et cetera, with, I think, a reasonable expectation that the number on that property for development would be comparable to the number for recreating public works on a different facility. Again, we don't know what, if anything, can get moved or, and how all that works and pieced together. But I think they're in an order of magnitude, the same kinds of numbers.
Gary, thank you for that summary. There is one piece that I want to add to that, and that is the acquisition of the Thane property. We believe will give us the ability to empty out the old Public Works facility. As I'm fond of saying, I think the old Public Works facility looks like a lot like my basement, stuff that I think I may need to use at some point, but I'm not sure when. That would give us the opportunity to clear that out and store some of the things that really need to be stored in the Thane property, and then potentially put that property, the old Public Works facility, on the market to put it back on the tax rolls. And there, I am personally aware of at least one design schematic that has already been that's already on the books relative to the development of that property.
Just one quick question.
Go ahead, Bob.
Do we have an idea of how fast, what Land Act annual revenues are? How fast do they fill up their coffers?
Good question, Bob. Mary Jane, we had what, a year and a half ago purchased the 52 Church Street property, which brought it back down to around 600,000, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think when I looked today, and I can send everybody out where the land acquisition is and how the fees come in. But I think when I looked at it today, last year, as of June 30, it was close to $200,000 a year just in cell tower. It's like about 188,000, something like that. But I can send that information out to everybody later on.
Thank you. Just
great.
ballpark.
My experience is that it runs north of 10,000 a month. You may have renegotiated a couple of those leases, so it may be higher. And then you pick up some P&Z fees The easement to the land trust on the Dunk Rock Park went into that. So there's various small pieces of funding that also goes into that in addition to the rentals. The rentals of some of the agricultural land, which is farmed or, and those aren't big numbers.
It's just so we don't have to ask later, just so we know when we consider the options.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm actually, I have it up on my screen, so I'm glad I did, because for fiscal year 20, tower rental was 118. I was thinking 188 was 118. We've had some miscellaneous income from hang and that kind of thing for about 5,000, interest of about 5,000. We brought in some money from the Land Conservation Trust. Our surplus last year, just on the land acquisition and tower, was 133,000.
Right.
And there are some expenses that come out of that on a regular basis, including
Right.
appraisals, the environmental studies, and the land
Land
stewards
stewards. Mhm.
get paid out of that. So
And coffee, I hear.
I didn't get any. Who gets the coffee?
But I
Keith
will
went home.
send that report out to everyone. It is as of June 30 for this year, but I'll send that to everybody so that you can see exactly where the money comes from.
That'd be
Right, and
appreciated.
one of the considerations that I think we need to pay attention to is the cost of borrowing right now. And Bob, I know you've mentioned this over the last 18 months on several occasions. It's almost free money. The issue right now is we would probably not be going out for bands until, well, when are we going back out for bands, Mary Jane, or for bonding?
Oh, we wouldn't be doing that for almost another year.
Right,
August,
so,
right.
so
Yeah,
the
next
question there is,
August.
what do we do on interest arbitrage between now and then? Does it make sense for us to borrow at rates that are, as low as they are, or anticipate to be, by next August or whenever we go back out?
Well, if we get to refinance more bonds, we may not notice the difference. We'll get it back.
You're absolutely right, Bob. You're absolutely right.
Great. Gary, is there anything else you'd like to share with us, or are we in good shape? And we all appreciate the heads up on this, and Matt as well.
No, it's Gary. Thank you, Gary, for all the work you've been doing on this.
Yeah.
Have a great meeting. I'll go back to doing what I was doing.
Great. Well, feel free to stick around, Gary, if you'd like to. Congratulations. I think you've made it our longest public forum.
I was waiting for the gong to ring in 3 minutes.
Yeah. We gave you 27 more.
All right. Good night,
Thank you, Gary.
Thanks a lot.
Oh, there it is.
Okay. I don't think there's anybody else for public forum, so we'll move on. Item number 2, approval of minutes for regular meeting minutes of October 19th, 2020. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments or corrections? I think I had just like 2 typos, nothing big. On page 3, right under pension committee minutes, number 2, Mr. Trotta asked.
Yeah.
D there. And there was another one. Item number 7 on page 8. First full paragraph, right about the middle. 4th line says money from reserve to the appropriate line item, so the budgets match up for next year. Oh, I had one more, and it's under item 9. A couple of places where it talked about the transfers. I just want to make sure that the wordage is right, because it says transfers from undesignated fund. I've always been, at least for the last few years, I've been scolded before to say unassigned fund balance.
It is officially unassigned. We do tend to revert back to undesignated when we talk. So unassigned is the appropriate term.
And I'm sure our secretary probably did the same thing going back on years and years of saying undesignated. But I just want to make sure for record, it's unassigned.
I'm sure I probably used undesignated. After 30 years, it's hard to change.
When we've been scolded enough times, you know, not to say undesignated anymore.
Good job.
That's all I have. Anybody else have any corrections? Anything
I
else?
had a couple of things. Just looking at some of the notes in the minutes that are like old business, you know, like on page 2, the needs assessment, facilities needs assessment. We've been kind of assured we're going to get that report down, and it was Mr. Gurnham reported that it was going to come into his hands in November. I don't think we have that yet.
Well, we do have the standing building committee chairman in the meeting tonight, so we could ask him directly. So we could hold off on that one.
Okay. And the other thing I was looking for was the Mary Jane had indicated in item 9 that they were going to get some numbers from FEMA and CARES on the COVID relief. And I wondered whether that has at least come down so that we can discuss it at the appropriate time tonight.
Mary Jane?
I didn't know if you want to. I can tell you that we have put in our applications for reimbursement through June 30 to both FEMA and CARES, the Corona Relief Fund, CRF, through the state. We have yet to hear from either organization whether or not we are receiving any funding. But we're already working on our next quarter.
Right. Okay. So those, we'll answer one and one of your questions in the second, and the other one's already been answered. So I have to ask that during the town.
Okay, very good.
All right.
If
All
there's
right,
such
with
a
nothing further, we will.
I had one little revision if I could.
Yep, go ahead.
On page 7.
Yep.
Item 6. Ms. Malavasi, the paragraph that starts, Ms. Malavasi said, the third line down, the principal, it should be PRINCIPAL. An interest line. And then on page 6, the paragraph that says there was discussion about the consent order, and towards the end of the paragraph, the sentence that begins, they don't know yet. I think it should just say they don't yet know yet if the Army Corps will waive fines.
Okay.
Just to make it clear.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, anything else? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? I think we were all there, so. Great. Thank you. Item number 3, correspondence. Item number 1, standing building committee minutes. As I told you all last month, we were going to hopefully have a representative tonight from the standing building committee, and we got the chairman of the standing building committee, David DeMeo, tonight.
Evening.
David, thank you very much for joining us.
A pleasure.
To answer any questions, Cliff did a pretty decent job last month. I'm only kidding. He did a fine job answering a lot of the questions that we had. And again, any questions that we do have are going to be, mostly dealing with anything that's happened in the past. We know that, there's certain items that you may not be able to respond to or know the outcome of. So with that, I'm going to open it up to the board for any questions to Mr. DeMeo regarding the standing building.
I have one.
Sir, Ken.
Guilford Lakes on this would be page 2 of the standing building minutes. The notation that there is a new fee of on Guilford Lakes HVAC of 91,000, which, and then I see another Silver Australia in there with 49,000. And the decision was to go with Silver Petroleum, but they're still waiting for the addendum. And I wondered whether that's an appreciable factor or is it's a minor factor, because there is a big gap between 91.6 and 49.9.
Sure, and just to be clear, that gap also exists on the Cock Elementary School on page 1. So we had 2 competitive bids that came in, and Silver Petroselli has done a fine job for the town over the years, and has always proved to be competitive. So we have no reason to think that they are going to come back with any change orders or extras to the design. To be sure, I had raised a question about the detail in Antonazzi's proposals against the detail that was in Silver Petroselli's, and asked that we have that addendum with a very detailed scope of work prior to issuing a purchase order or the go ahead on those 2 design projects. We don't have it yet. That was Cliff's responsibility. That happened at our meeting 2 weeks ago. So when we have that, that'll be entered into the meeting minutes and we'll make a final decision then.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody,
If I can go,
anybody else?
I have a no.
Sure.
Good. Sorry, go ahead, Ken. Or
All right, or am I being flagged off or on? Where are we?
you're set. Go ahead.
Okay, 16, item 16, new business. And boy, this, as Matt would say, this takes us back to a shared history of when SBC was given responsibilities. And I too remember that any project that was over $10,000 would be sent to SBC for review. And there's an issue raised in 16.1 that asks for clarification on projects submitted by the town. The Board of Ed projects seem to come through with regularity, and there was some question as to whether they were receiving the opportunity to provide input on town projects as well.
As before David responds, as I see David smiling, back in my time as chair of the Standing Building Committee, this goes back to that time about school and town representation on the projects. I think the one thing that I will say is over the years, obviously the schools have always come forward with a lot more projects than the town. But I do recall there's numerous times that the town has had a project or 2 or 3 and have had the proper representation when needed. Cliff is just there because the running list of projects is always continual on all the schools. But on the town side, if there was something with the fire station, if there was something with the headquarters, if there was something police, with something with the town hall, typically there would be a representative from the town there. So it's always been a little bit of an issue of, is the Standing Building Committee just the schools or schools in town? It's always been the intent of both, as long as they meet that threshold. So I just wanted to add that, and David, see how the building committee looks at that now.
Well, thank you, Michael. I believe the committee absolutely looks at it in the same light as you just explained. The question came around the fact is we haven't seen projects. Maybe the expectation is we're going to see maybe as many as we get from the school system. And through Michael's explanation, that's probably not the case. We just wanted to make sure that it was out there that we're poised and ready to handle those projects. We just haven't seen them. I'm entering my 3rd year, I believe, on the board. And I could think of probably on one hand projects outside of Board of Ed that have come to us. I know there was an HVAC project at the police station, elevator at the town hall. And most recently, though it's been a little quiet lately, is the pickleball courts up at Bittner Park. But that was just more of a, let's get it into the meeting minutes. Let's do some research. I was charged with reaching out to Matt and others, which I haven't done yet, but I'm glad I have the opportunity tonight just to make sure we're not missing anything, that people are actually, committees are coming to us for that input and approvals.
Good.
Yeah, Matt, go ahead.
Dave, thank you very much for that preamble. You're right, we have not had that many significant projects, and we do take advantage of the expertise of the Standing Building Committee. I think part of the problem here is that for a number of years prior to your taking over this committee 3 years ago, we only had 2, 3 or 4 members of the Standing Building Committee, and there was a significant amount of concern about the capacity to handle multiple projects being, and come down the scope as it would for some of these smaller town side projects. So there was, I'm not sure, it was a reluctance to pass those along. But I think you have actually stated the last 3 or 4 projects that we've done on the town side. I clearly think that and expect that when we bring a project to the Board of Finance on a capital basis, that it has a blessing of you folks. I'm going to take Mike a moment of personal privilege. I just want to thank Dave for the work he has done in transforming the Standing Building Committee over the last several years. I think, Dave, are we at full capacity or pretty close to it? And he has strong-armed a few people to participate in that board, including his son and at least one of his son's friends, who he probably coached in 1 or 2 sports years ago. So
Well, they both work for me too, which is a plus.
you got the hammer.
Yeah, we have 8 active and very capable members.
It's a very good mix.
Yeah.
It's a
It is.
very good mix of talent and expertise.
Right, and we will take advantage of it. And Dave, you and I can certainly talk offline about what the thresholds should really be for us to send anything to you guys.
Sure.
Is there anything else for Dave or the Standing Building Committee? The only item that I have is really more about just a continuing schedule. I know that there are, this is actually seeming to be a light night on questions for the Standing Building Committee. Usually we have a few more. So I know that we had talked a little bit about having a rotating schedule. So I'm hoping that the Building Committee can have a representative at our meetings. Whether it's by Zoom or in person, we'll see how things go in the future, but have somebody who'll be able to answer the questions like you did tonight.
You'll see me more than likely until further notice, and I'll slowly wean that between myself and maybe one other person so that you'll have some consistency.
We appreciate that very much. So
Absolutely.
if there's nothing else for Dave, then I think we'll move on.
I thank you all very much.
Thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
We'll talk to you soon.
Have a good evening.
Okay, you too. Okay, moving on, item 2, Pension Committee minutes and the investment report. The only thing I will bring up to start is the discussions that were taking place about, I believe it was about the OPEB trust. And I guess that any timelines that we should be aware of regarding whether it's possible transfers or the establishment of that trust. And I know that's a Board of Selectmen. That needs to be moved by the Board of Selectmen, and then it's an ordinance change, I believe. So if you could just give us a little bit of, OPEB scheduling.
Absolutely, Mike. Thank you. And Mary Jane, you might as well unmute at this point. Last Friday, Mary Jane, myself, Town Council Pete Barrett, had a Zoom call with our representative from Shipman and Goodwin, who is putting together the OPEB trust documents. And we had some tweaking to do. We had some legitimate questions about how this worked. Where did we delineate what the contribution levels were, et cetera. So we think we've gotten to a pretty good point. At this morning's Board of Selectmen meeting, it was, the consensus was that at this point, we are not going to recommend any further contributions out of the healthcare fund to the OPEB trust until such time as we consider those in the context of the overall budgeting, and we get a little better feel for if there's some pent-up medical demand that might be artificially inflating our projected surplus owing to the COVID and people not taking advantage of healthcare stuff. But as Mitch Goldblatt pointed out earlier this morning, you can only get one physical a year. You can only go to the dentist twice a year. There are only so many expenses that you can incur within a given fiscal year for the healthcare plan. But Mary Jane, you want to talk a little bit more?
All I'll say is that we are back on track. Our next, once we finalize the documents again, and like I said, like Matt said, we are going through them with a real fine tooth comb at this point, since we're getting ready for the next step. That will require public hearings and town meetings to approve the ordinance changes and the trust documents. That's a major hurdle. Once those are in place, then we can begin to talk about how we're going to fund it. We do have the $1.2 million right now available to put that in. So we'll talk about how we're going to get that in there, and then work with our actuaries to come up with a schedule for the next 5 to 7 years to determine what our required contributions will be. We're looking to, as I've said in the past, raise that up each year until we get to a point that we are able to sustain our required annual contribution. And then at such time, we will begin to consider taking money out of that fund to pay for some of these OPEB expenses. But as we've discussed at other meetings, we're looking to build this fund up to a substantial number so that it can bring in enough interest to sustain the fund for a number of years. So the money will just be sitting there and earning money for the time being, and we will continue to pay the OPEB out of the medical fund. But the medical fund is just sitting there, and at least the OPEB funds will bring in some needed revenue.
If I could add one point to that,
Good.
not contemplated in the trust document is as Mary Jane talked about, is the funding of the plan, and that includes annual contribution levels, but more particularly the contributions by the respective organizations, the Board of Education and the town. So it is anticipated that we will need to develop a memorandum of understanding between the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Education relative to the appropriate funding of this plan going forward. One that commits both entities to those funding levels.
Matt, do you expect that there'll be any differences in the types of benefits that would be available to town employees versus Board of Ed employees, or is it strictly based on the number of employees within the two divisions?
It has to do with individual contracts for the affected employee groups. For instance, one of the bigger liabilities is the police department. All right, they have the most generous OPEB benefits allowed under any contract that we have with employees. There are some individual contracts that have been written over the years relative to senior people in the organization, and there are also a couple of other contractual obligations on older contracts. However, at this point, we are not. The intention is that we will not be growing that liability beyond the folks that are already in those contractual obligations for OPEB benefits. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
Question on the pension fund balance. Okay.
Go ahead.
I noticed that in the item 4, it went down by about $1.7 million. Is that predictable? Is there any concern about that?
I looked at that.
It's timing the market, really. What happened over the last 3 or 4 days probably corrected that. Mary Jane, I think you sent out a pension fund balance on Friday that had it back up over $75 million, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. It's definitely a fluctuation, and you have to keep in mind that when I do that report, it's a point in time. You know,
Right.
the stock market changes daily, and a lot of you probably know that much better than I do. But this is a snapshot in time, which is why the pension committee receives weekly notifications of the balances so that they can have a better feel of where we stand.
I had a look, Ken, that month of September, the general markets dropped 5%, and this
Yep.
fund dropped less than 2%. It did what it was supposed to do. You'll see the same thing.
Now it's zooming up.
Yeah.
Back up again. Okay.
I just want to confirm very quickly or clarify the 1.2 million you mentioned about we've already committed to the OPEB fund, to the trust. That 1.2 has already been agreed by the Board of Finance to move into that. We're just waiting for it to be established.
Correct.
Right.
The 1.2 million is in a committed fund balance in the general fund.
Right.
Specifically for OPEB, committed for OPEB.
Right. We did that. What was that? About a year ago?
Yeah.
About a year ago, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Anything else for pension or on pension? Okay. We shall move on. Item number 4, review and approve expenditures for the Board of Education for October 2020. We have Kristen Peck, who's our reviewer, or the Board of Ed reviewer, who's going to report to us, and Linda as always. So Kristen, the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you. It's nice to see everyone.
Nice to see you.
All right. Our expenditures for the month of October were $5,208,209. We are pretty closely approximating where we were in the prior year. Revenues for October were $9,434. A little bit of that is from Medicaid, and the majority of that, just over 7,000. Did I say 9 million? I meant 9,000. I think I did that last time too. So $9,434, with 7,300 of that coming from pre-K tuition and the remainder from Medicaid. Salaries are about what we expected. They're similar to where they were last year. Employee benefits is a little bit different, primarily because of unemployment coverage that we're paying. We've been averaging since April about 12,000 a month from April until now for unemployment for folks that were subs or folks that worked for different portions of the year last year that are still covered under our benefit services. And that's prior to COVID, we had pretty much nothing. So you'll see a little bit of a discrepancy there in employee benefits year over year. Purchased services, about what we expected. Tuition were a tiny bit lower. Supplies and materials were a little bit lower than we were this time last year. Capital, we are a little bit lower than we were last year, and we don't have any other significant projects projected for this year. Transportation is interesting. Transportation, we are approximately where we were last year. And though we're not sending kids to school on Wednesdays, and though we have a couple fewer days this year, we're still paying so far the full transportation expense. Linda's working a little bit to see if we can negotiate that somewhat, but it's not looking all that favorable yet that we're going to be able to get much of a savings there, despite the fact that we're not using the buses as much. So that's a little bit to be determined at this point in time. And then that, of course, brings us to COVID, where we've so far spent just over $1 million on COVID PPE materials and the like. In October, we spent just over we spent about 255,000 as compared with 355,000 through the end of September. So we're just about just over $1 million. The good news is we have received some grants. We haven't received the money yet. We've been approved for some grants that will cover just under 600,000 of that. So about 591,000 will be covered from 2 different grants that we will be receiving. One is the CRF, the Coronavirus Relief Fund grant, and the other is the Elementary and Secondary Schools Emergency Relief Grant. So those will be helpful, but we're still looking at about $500,000 that we hadn't budgeted for, and we're only in October. I wish that I had better news to tell you about that, but I suppose the good news is we've already purchased a lot of the materials that we've needed to purchase. And obviously there's not really any end in sight to how we need to continue to prepare in the schools to keep the kids as safe as we can. Let's see, the warrant that we are submitting is $2,411,242. And in the warrant, a lot of the things that you'll see that are different than normal are COVID expenses. You'll see a lot of lease for webcams and things like that to help teachers teach virtually. There wasn't anything in particular in the warrant that I felt needed to be addressed. I don't know if Linda or Katie felt like we needed to point anything else out. Other than that, I'll leave it up to you guys to see if you have any questions for us.
I have a couple questions,
Go ahead, Ken.
if I may. You say that we've received $600,000 in grants, or we are on line to receive the 600,000. That still leaves the district on the hook for 500,000 at least, and growing. Is this the maximum relief we can anticipate from these 2 pieces of legislation, or are there other areas we can tap into? Because that's a big load for us, and it grows each week. It's growing. We know that. So what is the latest intelligence from the Board of Education on what we may be able to secure in addition to what we've already gotten, or what we've already been pledged, I should say?
The only other funding that we can apply for at this time would be FEMA reimbursement. These 2 grants, this is all that we will get out of these 2 funding sources, is the amounts that we listed there.
What do you think we may be able to get from FEMA?
I'm sorry?
What do you estimate we might be able to get from FEMA?
I'm not sure. I know a lot of FEMA no longer is going to be covering any of the PPE equipment. So none of that stuff will be covered as of middle of September. So I don't know exactly what we will be getting from FEMA. We haven't heard on our first submission if any of that is going to be covered yet. That's right, Mary Jane?
Correct. FEMA is doing what FEMA always does, and they cover expenses based on a specific incident. Typically, it's a hurricane or a tornado or something like that. The way that they're handling COVID is incident-based as well. So let me give you an example of what they'll cover and won't cover. So for instance, Town Hall and the other buildings on a preventative basis were disinfected. FEMA will not cover that. Had there been a COVID incident at Town Hall, and because of that, we disinfected the building, FEMA would cover that for 75%. So a lot of the expenses that we originally thought would be covered by FEMA are not. And so we're putting all of those through the Corona Relief Fund, through the state, in the hopes that we will get some relief from them. But as we discussed last meeting, there are certain items that even the state is not covering. So we are not guaranteed any of the funding that we have put through both of those programs. And unfortunately, we haven't heard back from them either. And I don't know when we'll hear. The news is trickling in throughout the state. Only a few municipalities have heard from both FEMA and the state. If you can imagine, this is a national epidemic, and FEMA is dealing with not only 169 towns in Connecticut, but all across the nation. So we are trying to be as lenient and not bugging them as much as possible. But as soon as I hear something, I'll be sure to let the Board of Finance know. Probably more than you wanted me to say, but.
Thanks,
No.
Mary Jane.
Thank you.
I have a question, Mike.
Veronica, go ahead.
It's more of a general question, but how did the tents fare last night in the windstorm? Did we lose any? Did any come down, rips, that kind of thing?
I didn't hear anything about the tents at all today. So
Well, that's a good thing.
yeah, I'm taking no news as news.
Yeah, likewise, I did not hear anything.
Or did I?
I've got
And-
a couple questions too.
Okay. Wait a minute, hold on, Veronica. Do you have one more?
Well, I was gonna, are these tents being used? Are the students being allowed to go there for their mask breaks?
I know they were being used for certain in some locations. I know Dr. Freeman told that he was up at the high school and the kids were out there and they were able to take their masks off and play their instruments, and they were spaced out outside, so they were able to use the tent to for band practice. I heard one other school for certain, the kids were outside and they were able to take their masks off. And I forgot what the class, what they were doing, but they did use the space.
So I'm seeing on the warrants too, I'm seeing repairs again for heating and air issues. Is our equipment in all the schools holding up so far? We're headed into the winter. You know, I see air balancers, $10,800, $8,000 for district air balancing, and then repairs at Adams, Jones, and then emergency repairs. So I'm, you know,
The air
asking
balancing was
questions.
actually to adjust the systems to allow in the maximum amount of, if I get this right, maximum amount of air, fresh air into the buildings, so that we could have a better air exchange in the buildings. I don't know if I'm explaining that right. Maybe somebody.
No, I know what you mean.
Right.
I know what you mean, Linda.
Okay. As far as I know, we haven't had any issues with heating systems that was anything severe. So I'm hoping that the systems are working as well as they can at this point, and will stay that way.
It seemed like a lot of those warrants were just maintenance items that happen every year. And then the emergency repairs are for the systems that we know that are getting older that need to be replaced. So they seem pretty typical.
Well, no, because, you know, there's 2 invoices that are over $10,000 and the description doesn't indicate which school it is. You know, maybe it is the schools that we're aware of, but, you know, it's still $10,000.
Is that so? But if there's no school associated with that, is that district wide? For that reason?
I don't know.
For
Yeah,
that,
I don't know.
For that CFM issue.
Yeah.
So there were 2 bills for air dynamics. Oh, I'm sorry, for air balancing for 18,000. It was a 10,000 and an 8,000. The other repairs.
Page 2.
For air dynamics. Sure, off which ones those were, I'd have to look. I haven't heard of any issues ongoing with any of the systems.
Okay.
Jonathan, You had a couple questions?
Yeah, Linda, I wanted to ask you a little bit about these grants and then the process to apply for the FEMA reimbursements. We'll still be applying for FEMA reimbursements, right, for the $1 million of expenses?
No,
that correct?
we can't double dip. So anything that's covered under the ESSER grant or the CRF grant, we can't apply also for FEMA. And FEMA,
Okay, but we'll apply for the difference?
if it's an allowable expense, as Mary Jane said, FEMA is very strict about what they will and will not cover. So we're looking at what we think would be acceptable for FEMA, and we'll submit for those.
Okay, as of last meeting, I just thought we were going to try to get reimbursement from FEMA. Where did those grants come from? I didn't really know we expected those.
The ESSER grant and the CRF grant? Both
Yeah.
of those have
Are you
been,
expecting those?
yes. Yeah, they've been talked about for a while. I actually
Yeah,
thought the
as
ESSER
a
grant
matter,
would come in last year.
as a matter of fact, the CRF grant requires that we go through the Board of Ed's ESSA grant, or however, it's whatever the acronym is. It requires we go through there first before we apply anything to the CRF fund, because the CRF fund is really meant to be the anything left over fund after FEMA, after other grants and any other opportunities. So yes, we're aware of all of the funding, and we are putting everything through somewhere. Every dollar that we're spending is being applied somewhere. Whether or not we'll be reimbursed for it is yet to be seen.
Okay, and then the other thing is I see a tabulation of the COVID expenses inside the expense worksheet. And I was just curious if you could maybe elaborate a little. You know, I can understand equipment and obviously these extra bus monitors and some of the things we've talked about so far, but I was kind of curious, are we hiring more substitute teachers because some teachers are out with COVID, being COVID positive? Like where are some of these expenses coming from?
So there were some teachers that were added at the high school to reduce class sizes. That's the teachers. Substitutes is for teachers that are out for various reasons on a leave that are COVID related. So
Okay, makes sense.
we are bringing in substitute teachers to cover classrooms for that. We've brought in extra recess and lunchroom aides. The lunchroom aides are in the classroom so the teachers can go have their lunch because the kids are eating in the classrooms. Recess aides is so that the kids can be spaced out on the playground and there's just adequate supervision as the kids are outside. We've hired some health aides to aid the nurses and to be in the isolation rooms if we have to put a student in the isolation room, so the student will be monitored in there. Obviously extra custodial to clean the buildings and the bus monitors.
So,
Okay, I just wanted to get a feel for it. I kind of figured some of it.
Okay.
Further question?
Thank you.
yeah, Ken, hold on a second. I just want to mention something on that. So when you mention COVID related, I mean, that doesn't mean that they have COVID necessarily. One of the things we're dealing with is COVID related could be that a teacher has children as well, I believe. And if their preschool has shut down, that triggers a COVID related event that they can't make it. So they need a substitute to take over for the 2 days. That's my understanding that that's COVID related. We're dealing with it at our office as well.
Right.
So it's not necessarily that you have it, it's that you're indirectly affected because of another entity or organization being shut down, and you have to now take on the burden of either having your kids at home or something along those lines.
Right. Well,
Can I ask a related question to that?
Sure, while we're on it.
In terms of the staffing, so technically then the capacity for staffing is like exponentially impacted based on one student or one person, right? A track. So how is that working in terms of like the cost, but also the subs and how many people? Do you have enough substitutes, or is it getting to the point where staffing is a problem?
It's a little bit of both, right? So as Linda noted, we hired additional what we call building subs for the schools. So these are kind of permanent subs in the building that we can rely on. In addition, we have subs that can come in. But I will tell you, we had to send, we have students at Baldwin Middle School right now who are on remote learning, not because they need to quarantine, but because their teachers needed to quarantine. And we cannot then have these kids in the building because there are not enough teachers to teach them. So it is a little bit of both. This is something that is happening across the state, right? Is that we continue to not see kind of a lot of any really transmission within the school, but one kid who is positive can impact, particularly at a middle school, a number of teachers as well as a number of classrooms. And we are seeing that cascading effect now of sending home additional kids, again, under no quarantine order, but because we can't staff their classrooms.
Right. And so do you anticipate that being less and less sustainable, or are you planning on hiring more people, or what's the plan?
It could continue to be a problem. It is hard to find substitutes right now. It is hard. Okay. It's hard to find the number of substitutes we need, for sure. Linda, please feel free to jump in if you have additional things to add to this. But we're having trouble getting the number of subs we would need to keep these classrooms going when we have to send home, in some cases, 7 or 8 teachers from one school building.
Right. And I'm sure it's not, in some cases, is it worth the risk to have a sub? Just for
subs are so hard to find right now. I serve on the board of directors for Learn, which is our regional educational authority, which covers from here to Stonington, and all of us are saying the same thing. Like, there are just, it's impossible to find subs. Everybody needs them. So it's been very difficult. People are going through, Kelly services and anywhere they can find subs, and there's just none available. So it's challenged.
Okay. Thank you for all of that. We piggybacked a bunch of things on that. Ken, I think you had.
I had actually 2. One's a small question, one's a larger. I wonder why the travel line is up. I would think that travel would be reduced in these times. Instead, we're at 74% of the annual encumbrance right now.
Yeah, Ken, I had the same comment or question too. I was curious. I was going to make the assumption is it sports teams related, or I don't know, but what is the cause for the travel being up like that?
No, there's a stipend that is paid out of Dr. Freeman's contract for travel. And instead of getting charged to the salary line, it is charged to travel because it covers his travel for the year. So there's that's an annual stipend that is paid out of his contract in July.
So that all relates to Dr. Freeman.
Yes.
I have a more important question to raise on this, and this is in the superintendent's report on October 13th, item 8.1, if you can all go to it. And I'm glad Katie's here because this is an alarming figure to me. Dr. Freeman noted that 68 students will be homeschooled this year compared to 26 last year. Well, my question is, why is it up so dramatically? And is this anything that the Board of Education is addressing.
Can I?
Way of breaking that down or what?
I'm going to suggest that a lot of that is COVID related. So a couple things that we've noted, and I don't know how, I don't know the distribution of those 68 kids. We know our kindergarten numbers this year are low. They're low because we know, at least in several cases, parents with kids ready for kindergarten in the middle of a pandemic said, you know what, I'm going to wait a year. I will check with Dr. Freeman whether those kids are included in that. They may not be, because obviously you can homeschool or you can simply wait a year, as I just suggested. But in other cases, there were parents who decided, instead of having their children either be partially remote, or if they felt uncomfortable sending their children during a pandemic, instead of being fully remote, that they would choose instead to homeschool.
So we don't know the spread on that.
I can't tell you the reason for each of those 68 kids.
Yeah.
But I believe that many of those are decisions made during a year of a pandemic.
You're not sure of the spread of it, whether it's high school or incoming kindergartners or what?
I want to be careful. I may be misspeaking to suggest that the kindergarten number would be included in that 68, again, because as I said, right, if you delay, you're not homeschooling, you're simply delaying.
Right.
So let me be careful, and I can double check that. But I don't know the spread of the 68 across grades.
Thank you.
Makes sense though.
I have one lighter note. I never suggest spelling errors, but this one is cute. On the Operations Committee minutes of October 13th, item 4, Dr. Freeman said there will be 2 public meetings to elicit input from the community. I think he meant illicit.
You, Ken, are not the only person who caught that error. And we corrected those in our, yes, we corrected them in the minutes before we approved them last week.
It's a great error.
Probably a common one too. Is there anything else? Warrants or meeting minutes?
Do you want to talk about tuition?
Sure. Well, let's go to tuition. The one thing I did notice about tuition, thank you, Linda, is that on the private outplacements, it's virtually the same in terms of what the actual count is versus the budget. Obviously, the numbers fluctuate, but student count seems like on the public side, though, there seems to be on a couple of them, there's some students that have decided not to go outside of, outside of our school district, regarding whether it's, a VOAG or a sound school or some of the others that are listed. So there seems to be, well, then again, I look at the number and there's more public outplacement. So it's not really a number issue on the students, is it? It's more of the level of services that are needed.
Yes. Yeah. Some of those public outplacement ones are a bit more expensive than some of the others. We don't have very many students at Middletown VOAG or Vinyl or Sound School that we've had in the past. We do have more in other public outplace facilities. But we are right now still trending under budget, which is some good news. So last month it was about 150,000. We're about 170 under budget this year. And that is because we had one student change facilities. And the new facility is actually a little bit less expensive. So we'll have a little bit more of a savings. So we're hoping this trend will continue. We're trying to keep those numbers down in count numbers and in cost numbers. So we'll, we still have a ways to go through this year yet, but we're hoping to stay this way.
A glimmer of good news.
Yes.
Anybody else?
I had a question. The dining services were an issue a month or so, and the hope was that when the elementary and middle school students came back 4 days a week, that it would tick up a little bit. Have you noticed any bump up in revenue?
It has gone up, but way behind. And we're not the only district that is having this issue. Our counts have picked up, not anywhere to near what they should be. We have actually, through October, we've at about almost $180,000 loss for 2 months. So we've laid off 4 FTEs. We had added some hours at the start of the year so that we could, because we were taking the lunches to the classrooms and we thought it was going to take longer. We've reduced those hours back down to what they were before in order to try and save some money there. And we're looking at some of the food costs, but right now it's picked up, but not enough that's going to sustain us if it keeps going. We'll see. Changes just occurred in November, so we'll see by the end of the year how things really are going.
Any thoughts as to why that's trending that way, or what's changed? I mean, obviously there's a virus, I get that, but I wouldn't think that would diminish people's desire to eat. But
And yeah, and we are approved for free meals for all. So it's all students 18 and under in Guilford can eat for free. So we're not charging for any lunches, but we're also not doing any of the a la carte stuff was always some of the big money makers. We're just doing the bag meals. So people aren't taking them.
You also technically only have half the population in for 2 days, then no one. And then half the population in for the other 2 days, and then whoever takes you up on, the meals, the rest of that are either home 50% or on the full day Wednesday. So it's got to be a little bit, crazy to be able to keep up with all of that.
Yeah. So we're trying to see what we can do to change things to try and get a higher participation, trying to do everything we can to put together meals that, families are going to want or kids are going to want that they can take home on the days when they're not in school. So we're looking at it, but I've talked to business managers and dining service directors across the state. We had a joint meeting between the two groups a few weeks ago, and everybody was in the same boat. Everybody was saying the same thing. Participation is low. Even with the free meals for all, everybody was having the same problem.
and that's after last year was a really good year for the dining for the town.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else? Board of Ed? If not, I'd like to take a moment. I missed an item that I meant to bring up in correspondence, so I'm going to do it now, and it's probably appropriate because it's Board of Education. But I did want to, before we accept the budget or the expenditures for the Board of Education, I just wanted to mention that Dr. Freeman was acknowledged with an honor with the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents. I think a lot of us have received that notification either through an email from Guilford Public Schools or an email that I sent out to all of you that I got from Dr. Balistraci last week. But for the viewing public that, for the few of you that will watch this, I did want to actually just very quickly read what was given to us on November 13th, or was announced, I should say, from CAPS, which is the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents. The Guilford Public School Superintendent Paul Freeman, Connecticut educator, innovator, and champion of equity and learning for more than 25 years, has been named the Connecticut's 2020 Superintendent of the Year by CAPS. Just very quickly, I'll just read this real quick. Dr. Freeman has served as superintendent of schools in Guilford since 2011. In Guilford, Dr. Freeman's equity and social justice work includes his efforts to discontinue the school's use of its Native American mascot and working to help teachers to be more culturally responsive in their instruction. He's an adjunct. These are some of the things I didn't know about him, so that's why I'm reading it. He's an adjunct instructor at the University of Connecticut in the Neig School of Education. Among his numerous professional activities in support of public education in Connecticut nationwide, he serves as co-chair of Connecticut's COVID-19 Learn from Home Task Force and is a member of the National Advisory Board at the University of Michigan's National Center for School Safety. I probably shouldn't have read that because now I can't read anything else for the rest of the day, but I just wanted, on behalf of the board, congratulate Dr. Freeman on this honor. I know it's a huge acknowledgement from the state, and I know he sent a message. Not only did we get notification last week of this, but he responded today and gave kudos to a lot of different leaders in this town. So I know he was doing he was being humble and modest of the award and the recognition, but he truly deserves it. So I just wanted to thank him on behalf of the board.
We will certainly, thank you, Mr. Ayers. We will certainly pass that on. I must say that we are extraordinarily fortunate in this town to have Paul Freeman kind of leading our schools, and it's wonderful to see CASP recognize that officially. So we will let him know. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and with that, I'd like to entertain a motion to accept the report of expenditures of the Board of Education for the month of October 2020 in the amount of $5,208,209.29.
So moved.
So moved.
I hear a
Second.
motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed? Abstentions? Recusals? Thank you. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Linda, as usual. Item number 5, review and approve expenditures for town government for October 2020. Mary Jane?
Well, I think I've already spoken enough tonight, so I'll just pass. No.
Yeah, no, not that easy.
I try. Okay, we'll start with
Thank you,
revenues.
Kristen.
We'll start with revenues. As of the end of October, our revenues are just shy of where we were last year. We're at 51.8% now as opposed to 54.3% last year. Tax collection is down less than 3% at this point. Finance interest income is not doing as well as we had hoped, or anywhere near as close as it's been the last few years. So we're still hopeful that that will come back to us. We have a couple of our departments which have already exceeded their revenue budget. One being the Golf Commission has exceeded their budget already by over 6%, thanks to the open and the availability of the golf course during COVID. The other item is Public Works. They are over their revenues as well for not a great reason, but the fact that our stump dump is doing extra duty, mainly because of the storms that we've had and people bringing items there. Park and Rec is down just a little bit, mainly because they're not able to get the room fees that they would normally have throughout the year. Other than that, I really don't have anything to say on revenue unless you have any questions.
Could you just remind all of us on the selectmen's budget what that number is? Because that's
I'm
making up for
sorry.
the dismal finance.
Yeah, well, I'm going to keep it there. No, that's the money that we've gotten in as credits for the energy performance contract. Matt and I had a meeting today, and we will be dispersing that between the town and the Board of Ed very soon.
So it's a placeholder for now.
Yeah, it's so we don't forget it, which is exactly why it's there, just smacking us in the face so we don't forget to take care of that.
Okay.
We'll be doing that very soon.
Okay.
You know, Mary Jane, this is John Trotta. I kind of remember at the budget meetings, the Golf Commission came up with a great marketing plan for the golf course, and I was wondering if that had anything to do with their bump here in income.
The chairman of the Golf Commission was at the Board of Selectmen meeting this morning, and she was asked if the bump in their revenue was purely COVID related. And I believe Matt can help me maybe answer the question, but obviously COVID has made a great dent into their revenues, but the commission has been working very hard last year and this year to increase their revenues and to decrease their expenditures, and they are continuing that work even through COVID. So they are hopeful that this is a trend that will hopefully continue.
I agree, Mary Jane, you're absolutely right. I think by everyone's admission, COVID has had a significant impact on their revenue. Clearly, they've already exceeded their revenue target for the year, and you still have the months of April, May, and June coming forward. And if form holds true from what they did last year in those months, you could probably expect close to another $100,000 worth of revenue out of those months. So, and a lot of that is COVID related. People who are working from home now have an hour and a half to go play golf at lunchtime, or aren't driving home from work at the end of the day. Clearly, all age groups have started to utilize the course more frequently than we've seen in the past. So yes, I think the bulk of this is related to COVID. Some of the tournaments last year, the commission hosted a tournament where they were able to raise $6,000 or $7,000. Obviously, they were unable to do that in either the spring or the fall this year. But they clearly have stepped up some of their advertising as well. But I'd be foolish to suggest that the significant increase in revenue was anything other than COVID related.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
You're welcome.
Anything else on revenue?
Mary Jane, do we have any color just on the tax collection? You know, it's down 2.5%, as you know, but do we have any color on what the expectation is? Will it come in eventually?
Hard to say, Bob. You know, I wish we had a crystal ball. Like I've said at other meetings, you know, I'm really concerned what January will bring, because although Guilford did a great job of bringing in their revenue and paying their taxes in the month of July, like they were asked to do, but we did have some that were had difficulty paying and waited till October, and as you can see, unable to pay. Hopeful that those people will be able to pay in January, but there's a possibility that we might see another decrease then.
Yeah, just simply, it's only 2%, but that's on a big number.
Correct.
Head over to expenditures.
All right. Similar story. Was there a question? No.
Ken, did you have something on expenditures or on revenue?
On expenditures.
Okay, well, go ahead, Mary Jane, and then Ken, your first time.
You'll probably answer it right away.
Okay, let's hope. As far as expenditures, we're pretty much where we were this time last year, 36.5% as opposed to 36.1%. two of our departments are significantly over, the town clerk and the registrar of voters are both showing a huge increase, and that's mainly due to, well, it's not mainly, it's all due to this past election. As I reported last month, we are receiving some additional money from OPM, and now that that election is over, we'll be applying those revenue dollars to the line items that are over due to the election, in the hopes of bringing those numbers back down to a more relatively flat number to where we would normally see. The other department that is a little higher is the health department. And you might think that the health department is spending more money because of COVID, but they're really not. That was really because we had an overlap between Dennis Johnson and Sonia. We needed to, if you can understand, because of COVID, we needed a smooth transition there. So we had some overlap in salaries and some payouts there for Dennis. So that's mainly the reason why the health department is higher than last year. That's kind of all I had to say. I don't know if I answered Ken's question, but if I didn't, I'll do the best I can.
Well, of course, I misread what the salary, the overlap of the two leadership roles in the health department. But my question is whether we are anticipating increases in expenditures on the salary end of things for the balance of the year.
Specifically in health, do you mean?
In health, yeah.
We have hired someone to do contract tracing, but we received a grant for that funding. So unless Matt knows something that I'm not aware of, I don't expect that number to increase.
I agree with you, Mary Jane. We were able to bring in the new health director at a salary that was less than her predecessor. So we felt comfortable with that overlap period because the savings in the different salary differential would easily absorb the additional cost of having both of them together working side by side during these trying times for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so just to add on that, as time goes by, we'll see the effect of her lower salary in that line item.
Thank you.
Okay. That's the health department was mine that I had, but you answered it for me. So anything else on expenditures? Or we'll just move on to medical.
Okay, so for the month of October, you'll see that our claims are over $880,000, which is a little bit closer to what our expected monthly claims are. Hard to know whether or not that's because people are going back to the doctor from not going last year. It's really hard to say with those numbers at this point, although as I think Matt noted earlier, we do expect the standard claims that people would have, if they normally have their physical, the same thing, they might be going still for their physicals and going to the dentist and doing those regular preventative items. Now, since doctors' offices are opening up, hard to say what will happen over the next couple of months. But we do see the catastrophic claims increasing at a greater rate than last year. The catastrophic claims are already over $800,000, and we didn't hit that until the end of November last year. So again, hard to know what that's telling us. Although last year, if we remember, our claims for catastrophic were down. So having them come up this year is a reflection of things maybe getting back a little bit to normal.
Yeah, a little bit of catch up.
Mm-hmm. Other than that, we are showing a projected surplus of approximately $680,000 as of this time, and we'll continue to monitor it as time goes by.
Okay. Not much on that, thank you. And anything on warrants? Special, regular, or weekly? Oh, come on, someone's got to have something.
See, that's because I did all the talking earlier. I'm getting a report.
Nice. All right, well, hey.
Hey, I think I have one thing here.
No, I knew, see, I knew if I asked, I knew Ken would come forward.
You waited too long.
Don't want to disappoint you.
There you go.
What do you
What do you
got,
got?
Ken?
Could you explain, Mary Jane, the special fund, the top line, just to explain that, the town bonded capital projects, that 215,000 was allocated just this past month?
That's the replacement of an ambulance.
That's in special funds.
Yeah, it's
Correct,
fine.
because it's in bonded
Bonded
funds.
capital.
Bonded capital.
Capital, okay. And I had another question for you on Bloom Shapiro and the warrants, if I might ask. I don't know what we're paying Bloom Shapiro annually for what they're doing for us in the Board of Ed and in the town side. But I did notice on the warrants that there was a $15,000 payment made to them for both the audit for Board of Ed, and then another 15,000, if I can find the page, page 7.
Ken, are you on regular? You're on regular warrants.
Yeah, it's fine.
Regular warrants, yeah.
So we do have, I can tell you that our town side, we have a budget of 29,500 for the annual audit. And we have 2,000 left for it, which we will pay after we receive our final documents. The town and the Board of Ed share in this expense. So you would see a similar number on the Board of Ed side.
So they both received half, basically. Is
Yes,
that- okay.
correct.
They'll receive the balance of it sometime in July or the summer?
Our audit is almost done now. I would expect to have that paid out, if not by the end of December, at least the first part of next year. Because that's for the audit that we're doing now. We pay in increments. So for different milestones that are hit for the audit, we pay. So the last bit of it will be paid out, like I said, after we receive the documents.
I see. Okay.
Speaking of audit, will that be in our hands for next meeting, December?
It's possible.
Okay.
It's very possible that it will be in your hands. If we may not have it scheduled to have the auditors make the presentation by December, but it's possible that we would have the audit by then.
Okay, just curious. That's all.
Mr. Chairman, a question for Mary Jane. Mary Jane, has Millman been able to provide the materials in a timely fashion this year? Because that has consistently been the reason that we've not had audits completed prior to the end of the calendar year.
Town staff provided Millman the data that they needed as quickly as we could after the end of the fiscal year, and Millman turned those around and provided the documentation back to us before we even closed out the year. They were the first things done.
Great, good to hear.
Came through.
Absolutely, that's what they promised when we met with them, and as long as we get the data to them, they can turn that around in 3 weeks, no longer 3 months.
Right.
And Mary Jane, one other question, owing to the complications of COVID, Was it any more difficult for Bloom Shapiro to conduct their audit this year than in previous years?
I did mention that the audit is almost complete, but we are stumbling through the last few bits. We've had a couple of members of the team working on our audit come down. One came down with COVID, and another, I believe, had a family member. So we had a little bit of a bleep because of that. But the auditors did come to our offices as they normally would. We did a lot of it through email, but they did come in, and we stayed social distance and made sure we had our masks. So it really didn't stop the bulk of the work. We're just stumbling over these last minute stuff.
Good. I would have figured there would have been a little bit more complication, but it seemed like they meandered it well.
Yeah, we're able to do so much of it through email and downloading through Munis that it works for us.
Right.
Once again, I asked this question too early, and I should have held on to it. What is the situation on refunding through these two programs? The refunding on COVID, the two programs that are out there.
You mean FEMA and the CRF
Yes.
funding?
Yeah.
We have put through the reimbursement request through June 30, and we were waiting to hear back from both programs.
So
As
when
for
we
the
get,
county and the Board of Ed.
so we get something like a $4,500 invoice from Algonquin Products for COVID-related products. All of that is, we're advancing the monies, and hopefully we will get reimbursement. We don't know how much we're going to be getting, do we?
That's correct. Every dollar that we put through one of our COVID lines that we consider COVID related is submitted to one of the 3 or 4 grant opportunities that we have, depending on which we feel has the best odds of getting reimbursement. But we don't promise that we'll get the money, but we do promise
Right.
we will try.
That's all we ask for.
Okay. Anything else for Mary Jane or for our first selectman? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve the report of expenditures of the town for the month of October 2020 in the amount of $2,393,308.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions, recusals? I do have recusals to any payments to Antonazzi Associates. And number 6, committee reports. Building permits.
Veronica, I will take the opportunity here. The Board of Selectmen this morning approved the fee structure, the new fee structure for the various land use departments. Lou made that presentation on your behalf earlier today. The 3 categories are health, brush, and leaf facility, as well as engineering. The second would be planning and zoning, inland wetlands, and administrative fees. And the third is related to payment for specific costs of services over and above our normal fees. The effort by the subcommittee as well as staff was to streamline and to make more sense of those building usage fees. There were some changes that were substantive, increased some fees. There were also some that consolidated fees. We think on balance, it made it easier for the residents and professionals to understand the respective fees. We can certainly share that with you with the ordinance, which was approved at this morning's meeting. So.
And that takes effect doesn't it have to go to a town meeting or a public meeting?
It went to public hearing earlier today, at the Board of
Okay.
Selectmen meeting. We went through public hearing. And then, based on the public hearing, and the feedback that we either received or didn't receive, it was approved by the Board of Selectmen. So,
Oh, good.
Thanks for the update.
you're welcome.
And number 7, old business. I see that Gary McElhenney is still on the line, so although I don't know if it's really considered old business, it's really new business that's only 2 hours old. So anything under old business? New business. Is there anything else for Gary, who has remained on the line, so to speak, on the video, regarding the land acquisition proposal?
In fairness, I've come and gone. I've been
I've noticed.
Are you fully packed yet, Gary?
Close.
Well, thank you again for the update. If there's nothing else under new business, I'll go to public forum. And if there's nothing left under public forum, actually, you know what, I do, I'm sorry, before I do any adjournment request. Under new business, I did want to mention that we do have the capital plan presentations that are to the Board of Selectmen on Wednesday. I apologize, I got everything all scattered today. That is Wednesday from 1:30 to 4:30, so hopefully as many Board of Finance members that can attend will. These are all the presentations and the multi-year plans that our departments are going to be requesting for capital, both bonded and in the budget. So
Yeah, I'll just add that all of the
Please do.
presentations are already on Board Pack if you want to review them.
yes, I just downloaded them right before this meeting. I saw everything. So
I meant to say that too, so thank you. I forgot as well.
yeah, no, I kind of figured I had it down here just in case you forgot. So we got each other's back. We're okay. So hopefully we'll see some of you for that, for the capital presentations. I already did public forum, and I don't think we have any. And before I look to adjourn the meeting, just want to wish everybody happy Thanksgiving. Obviously, it'll be a Thanksgiving like no other. But hopefully we have capabilities like this by video to say hello to our families and loved ones. And I think we'll make it work. We'll be back together next Thanksgiving, and we'll get through the holidays. But happy Thanksgiving to all of you and everybody watching.
Here.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Stay well, everyone.
With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Ken, thank you. All in favor?
Non-debatable
Aye.
motion.
Thank you. Have a great one.
You
See you
too.
Wednesday.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.
Anyone